Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all you guys back. Welcome. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone online who's joining us as well. Today is the fourth day of our 5-day course, and what we're going to be doing is starting out with meditation. So I'm going to be guiding you guys in a meditation session. And then afterwards, we're going to be talking about this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me. I know many of you guys have had questions about this throughout the course, and I've said, hey, we're going to talk about this on Thursday, so this will be a great time to go in and actually talk about this natural law. We've really been talking about it the entire course because everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another comes back to this natural law, but now we're going to go in and talk about it specifically, and I'm going to help you understand how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma so that you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. After our mid-morning break, I'm going to be teaching you about what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. Then we're going to take our lunch break and we'll come back and I will share with you some information on how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life so you can actually get the real results of training your mind actively over a long-term consistent time frame. Then we're going to talk about our field trip tomorrow and help you guys understand what that's all about. And we even do, we even do activity this afternoon as well. So if you guys would like to join for a meditation, I'm going to start with the chanting, then I'll come in with some guidance to help you from there. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Bhutang Mahakewanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose, or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาโพตังมหาเขวันหังอาภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone online as well. As I mentioned towards the beginning of this course that I was going to slowly build you guys up to a 30-minute meditation. This is a 30-minute meditation. So if this felt like, wow, this was quite straightforward, like you didn't really feel much time at all, you can see what that feels like, or feels like, wow, that was a real stretch. That was really challenging for the mind. You can see that there's work for you to do there. Or some of you might have been like, wow, this was just perfect. This was exactly felt nice. So that's, you can see as a kind of like a threshold of what a 30-minute meditation is like, because that's ultimately what you would like to build up to, is a 30-minute meditation. And sometimes it takes people 6 months, a year, 2 years to build up to that. So you're not in a race or a competition with anybody. It's your own practice. So take your time, do what you need to do, but gradually build up to that, because that's where you're going to see the real transformation of the mind, when you're getting to that 30-minute mark. Okay, so I'm going to share this topic with you about what is Kamma and how does it affect me. Everything in the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. When we talk about awakening the mind, this is what you're awakening to. And when we talk about awakening, we mean cultivating wisdom. You need to cultivate wisdom about this natural law, because as long as you lack wisdom of it, you're not going to understand true reality and what's truly happening in the world and the best way to interact in the world. So this natural law is what's going to help you to be able to navigate the world and be able to make wise decisions where you're experiencing exclusively wholesome results. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be experiencing any unwholesome Kamma. It'll only be wholesome things that are happening in your day-to-day life. It doesn't mean everybody's going to do things your way. It doesn't mean you're never going to experience sickness or something like this, because there's 5 things that no matter how enlightened you are, you will still experience these things. You will still experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction, because these are all based in impermanence. Because impermanence, things are constantly changing. So no matter how enlightened you are, you'll still experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. And just because you're practicing these teachings really well doesn't mean that everything's going to be going your way, right? Sometimes when people hear me say that you're extinguishing your unwholesome karma and you're only experiencing wholesome things, they're like, oh, everything's going my way, right? The sea is parted. I can just walk down the street and everybody's going to be bowing to me. No, this isn't the case. You're still going to be in situations where people might be bitter and harsh and hostile to you. Very rarely, but it will happen. But your mind will be unaffected by that when people are doing those things. People might gossip and slander about you, spread rumors about you, right? This is still going to happen even when you're enlightened. So when we say that you're only experiencing wholesome karma, it means that your mind is going to be completely calm and peaceful no matter what's happening, but you're still going to experience certain things like this, right? You're still going to experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. But you can get to a point where you've extinguished your unwholesome karma, where all your decisions are leading to wholesome outcomes. Oftentimes people think that what they're experiencing in life is good luck or bad luck, or destiny or fate, or there's a God or entity, some entity called the universe that's controlling what you experience. Or some people think it's because of other people that you experience certain things in life. But everything you experience is a result of your decisions. So I'm going to help you to be able to see this, because when you understand this and you can understand the natural law of Kamma, it's very empowering. Because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's happening in your day-to-day life, you just need to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But as long as it's good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, it's God or some entity called the universe, or it's other people that are causing you to experience any particular thing in life, you're locked in. You can't change anything about your life, and you're basically a robot, right? And you know this isn't true. So you have free will, and your free will decisions are going to lead to any particular result that you experience. But with a lack of wisdom in this natural law, you will tend to make unwise decisions, and it's going to lead to unwholesome results. And you need to be able to see very clearly what this natural law is, so that then you can navigate the world more peacefully. So I'm going to walk you through helping you to be able to understand this natural law. And just like always, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. Here at the temple, if you guys could use the microphones, those of you online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like. So first, let's just talk about what Kamma is. This word Kamma, if it translated just one English word, I would just use that because it'd be easier for everyone, but it doesn't. So I need to still help individuals to understand this through using this actual word. Some people refer to it as karma. This is just a different language. It's the Sanskrit language, where the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So people who study those will tend to use the word Kamma, but it's referring to the same natural law. This is a natural law that is affecting in every moment, or functioning in every moment, and it's affecting everybody, whether you're aware of it or not. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is based in this natural law. This natural law is cause and effect, or action and results. It's the results of your decisions. Whenever you make a decision, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma. Or if you make an unwise decision, it's going to produce unwholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma. So there's nothing mystical or magical here with this. There's no being that's overseeing this and controlling it. It's not like it's a punishments and rewards, or who's to blame or who's at fault. That's not what it is. This natural law is functioning at all times based in your intentions, your speech, and your actions. The way that you interact in the world, you're going to experience certain results because of that. And again, if you lack wisdom in this natural law, you'll tend to make unwise decisions. And that's why on Tuesday, when we were studying the Eightfold Path, I was sharing that with you in detail, because that's where the Buddha is really exposing a significant portion of the natural law of Kamma. It's the Eightfold Path that's going to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. When you're practicing that to perfection for a consistent long-term period, that's what's extinguishing all your unwise decisions. So this isn't a system of punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. There isn't anything mystical or magical about it. It's not a black cloud that's that's following you around. I've heard some people say that there's like a bank account somewhere and you're making deposits into this bank account. And if you do enough wholesome things, you can make withdrawals and go out and do unwholesome things, right? There's all these misunderstandings about the natural law of Kamma. That's not what it is at all. So it's cause and effect, action and result. Nobody's controlling it. It's based on the decisions that you make that are going to lead to any particular result. So as we're starting to understand what the natural law of Kamma is, this is kind of like a summary to help you understand it, that it's cause and effect, action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Just very simple. Your life, your decisions, your results, right? You are going to experience whatever you make decisions about. So now let's just take a few of the phrases from the Buddha, a few of the teachings of the Buddha to illustrate two important topics or two important aspects about the natural law of Kamma. These are from those books, the words of the Buddha that I share. There's one particular book over there that is dedicated 100% to the natural law of Kamma. But we could really say the entire book series is dedicated to the natural law of Kamma because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to it. But these are two important aspects of the natural law that it's important to understand at this point in time as you're starting to learn about it. Here's some words from the Buddha. He says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying here is you're the only one that can produce Kamma for you. Sometimes you might be around people and you might say, oh, don't rub your bad Kamma off on me, right? That's not possible. It's not possible for that to occur. Or you might say, oh, let me give you some of my good Kamma. That's not possible. It's not possible for you to do that, right? So it's any decisions that you are making that's leading to any particular result that you're experiencing. So it's you that's making decisions and it's your results that you're experiencing. Then here the Buddha says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life or in the next rebirth or on some subsequent occasion, right? So here what he's saying is you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Right? No matter what you do, either wise or unwise, you're going to experience the results of that. Either in this life, the next life, or some subsequent occasion is future life after that. Now, I know many of you guys haven't actually independently verified the cycle of rebirth yet, and that's okay. That's where you're at in your practice. But ultimately, you can get to a point where you independently verify the cycle of rebirth. So here, the Buddha is saying you can't run and hide from your Kamma. You're going to experience it at some point. No matter what decisions you've made, you will experience the results of that Kamma. So when you come to understand this, that it's you that's making decisions that is leading to either wholesome or unwholesome results, and you can't run and hide from your Kamma, the wise individual would be like, well, let me understand this as much as I can because I'm not interested in experiencing unwholesome things. This is like if you were to walk down the beach and you were kicking up sand and it kept blowing back in your face, you're going to be like, whoa, I don't like this. What can I do to stop this from occurring? Oh, I just need to stop kicking up sand. Perfect. I'll do that, right? So that's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is trying to figure out why is all this sand coming back in your face, and you might not be able to see that very clearly without having studied the natural law of Kamma closely. So that's what the Eightfold Path is helping you to be able to see, is how to actively train your mind and awaken to the point where you've extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma. But now we're going to go in, we're going to talk about this specifically. I'm going to explain to you the 4 types of Kamma. One type is wholesome Kamma. The other type is unwholesome Kamma. Then I'm going to teach you what is old Kamma and new Kamma. These are the 4 types of Kamma that you need to understand. So wholesome Kamma is any decisions that you're making that are harmless. When you're not causing harm to others, this is going to produce wholesome Kamma. Then when you're making harmful decisions, that's what's going to produce unwholesome Kamma. Now, you learned on Tuesday that you can't cause someone else to be discontent, and you've hopefully independently verified that by now, that it's your own mind that's causing discontentedness, like the craving, desire, attachment is what's leading to the anger, the sadness, the frustration, and all these other things. You can't cause anyone else to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm is to cause harm to their material possessions, to their physical body, or their reputation. When you're causing harm, that harm is going to come back to you, right? So if you're making harmless decisions, then you will experience wholesome results or wholesome kamma. And when you're making harmful decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome kamma or unwholesome results. So right now, you're just sitting here listening to me. You're not causing any harm to anybody. That's why no harm is coming to you. You're just sitting here listening to me. You're not harming any being whatsoever. And that's why no harm is coming to you, right? This is the natural law of Kamma. Whereas if you were sitting next to the person next to you and poking them in the eye, and now you're causing harm to their physical body, there's going to be some harm that comes to you, right? Maybe someone yells at you, shouts at you, slaps you, hits you. Who knows what might happen, right? That's going to be the unwholesome Kamma that comes to you based on the decisions that you are making. So everything that you experience is going to lead to a certain result, either wholesome or unwholesome. And this is coming from either harmless decisions or harmful decisions. Then we've got old Kamma and new Kamma. What old Kamma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now. If you've made decisions in the past, you're going to experience the results of that later. Now that coming back to you is old Kamma. Any decisions that you're making now in the present moment that you experience in the future, that's going to be new Kamma. So I'll give you examples of this. Let's just say 3 years ago, I had some tax forms that I was filling out for the government, and I was lying on these tax forms. And now 3 years later, meaning right now in the present moment, I get a notice in the mail that says, hey, we found an error on your tax report. It's a $1,000 that you owed us, and we're giving you a $1,000 penalty and a $1,000 interest. You owe us $3,000. Okay, this is old Kamma coming back to me now because I lied on my tax forms 3 years ago. Well, now in the present moment, I have decisions to make, right? And if I didn't know any of these teachings of the Buddha, I might rip up the piece of paper and throw it away, try to hide from it, right? Or if I didn't know these teachings from the Buddha, I might call up the government or write them a letter and be bitter and harsh and hostile and scream and yell at them and tell them how, bad they are, one thing or another. And now I'm producing new unwholesome Kamma, right? Because in the present moment, I'm making unwise decisions through my speech and my actions, and now I'm going to produce new unwholesome Kamma that I'm going to have to deal with in the future. And I can't run and hide from this particular notice, right? It's going to affect me. So now, if you know the teachings of the Buddha and you're experiencing this old unwholesome Kamma coming back to you, then you know what you're trying to do here is extinguish it. You're trying to bury it in the sand so that you can be done with it. So instead of ripping it up and throwing it away or calling up the government and writing them a nasty letter or being bitter and harsh and hostile, you can understand, no, that's not the way that I'm going to extinguish this old unwholesome Kamma. Instead, I'm going to use the Eightfold Path. So maybe you call up the government or you write them a letter and you say, hey, I'm so sorry. I take full responsibility for this. I see that there's been an error and I would like to make amends here. But I don't have $3,000. I am so sorry, sir. I am so sorry, ma'am. And after you're being so polite and kind and friendly and respectful, they might say, you know what? I'll tell you what, we'll take off the penalty. We'll take off the interest. Just pay us $1,000. And you're like, you know what? I really appreciate that. That is so kind of you, but I don't even have $1,000. Is there any other options that we have to be able to solve this? Right? You're working towards a solution with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect. And they say, hey, I tell you what, we can work out a payment plan. Are you able to afford $100 a month over the next 10 months? And it's like, sweet, now we've got a solution. And now you've just extinguished this through being polite, kind, friendly, respectful, using things like right view, where you're accepting responsibility, right? And understanding craving, desire, attachment is causing your own discontentedness. You're practicing right intention, the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. You're practicing right speech, where you're now speaking at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness. You're not lying, slandering, having harsh speech or frivolous speech, and you're practicing right action. You're not causing any harm through your bodily actions, and now you can extinguish this unwholesome Kamma. And this is what you would like to do with every single aspect of your life, is extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, which I'm going to give you some more details on here in a moment. But first, let's go into more detail about this wholesome and unwholesome Kamma, because here, wholesome Kamma is being generated by harmless decisions, and unwholesome Kamma is being generated by harmful decisions. But there's something here that the Buddha taught that is connected to what I taught you yesterday. What's actually causing the unwholesome Kamma is craving, anger, and ignorance. Whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, that's actually producing unwholesome karma for you. So the craving is that central desire, the longing, the yearning, the wanting, the expecting, the selfishness. Things got to be my way. I want it my way. The mind's longing, yearning, and chasing after things. And when you're making decisions through your craving, desire, attachment, your own selfish desires, this is going to produce unwholesome karma for you. Whenever you're making decisions through anger, the bitterness, the harshness, the hostility, the ill will, the frustration, the agitation, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you because you're going to function unskillfully when you're allowing that to arise up in the mind. And then where all of that is coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. When you make decisions based on a lack of wisdom or confusion or misunderstanding, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. So that's why you're working to eliminate those pollutions of mind and making less and less decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, because that's producing all the unwholesome karma in your day-to-day life. You can look at any situation that you're experiencing and you can see that there was craving, anger, ignorance in that decision if you were experiencing unwholesome karma. You can even look at this on a global scale in global issues with political leaders and stuff like this. When they're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, they're going to be experiencing unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. Then the way that you produce wholesome karma is through making decisions through the wholesome roots. Remember, we talked about the unwholesome roots are craving, anger, and ignorance, and then the wholesome roots or the antidotes or the remedies are the wholesome roots. That's the generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. When you're making decisions through generosity, you're giving and sharing, right? You're helping others without any expectation of anything in return, sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. And that's going to produce wholesome results for you. It's going to enhance the quality of your mind. And there's a whole litany of other benefits that you're going to experience as well by practicing generosity. Then whenever you're practicing loving kindness, where you have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, where you have active goodwill towards others, and you're making decisions through your intention, speech, and actions for that to occur, it's going to produce wholesome results for you. Then when you're making decisions through wisdom, the wisdom of these natural laws, it's going to produce wholesome results for you, or wholesome karma, right? So this is the wholesome karma and unwholesome karma, new karma and old karma. Do you guys have any questions on these 4 types of karma before we go on further? Let me check online, see if we have questions. Okay. So, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. So now, let me share with you how to eliminate and extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Okay, because you're going to have unwholesome karma coming back to you. If you could snap your fingers right now today and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha, which you can, you're still going to experience unwholesome karma from this point forward. You're going to need to practice the teachings of the Buddha for a consistent long-term period because you have old unwholesome karma from the past, right? You have those decisions you made 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago that are going to come back to you, and you're going to experience the results of those. So even if you could snap your fingers today and instantly practice the teachings of the Buddha, you wouldn't be able to experience wholesome things today. 100%, because you still need to extinguish all that unwholesome karma coming back to you. The way that you can think about this is all throughout our life, we've been putting mud into our garden hose. We've been putting mud into the garden hose. And now on the path to enlightenment, what you're doing is you're taking your garden hose and you're hooking it up to the faucet and you're opening up the faucet. Well, if you come to the temple once every 6 months, if you're meditating once a week, once a month, if you're reading a book once every 3 months, you got like a little drip going through this impacted garden hose. You're not going to clean this mud out in this lifetime, right? But if you open up that faucet wider and wider, you're reading books, you're meditating, you're coming to classes and retreats, you're talking with your teacher, getting help as you need to with your own personal issues and challenges that you're having, you've got more and more water coming through that garden hose. But it's going to spit mud for a while, right? Because we've put mud in this garden hose. So it's going to spit mud out. And then every once in a while, you're going to see some clean water come out. But then it's going to be more mud, more mud, more mud. But then it's going to be clean water, clean water. Then there's going to be mud, mud. But then there's going to be some clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water. And then there's going to be some mud. right? And you keep putting clean water into the garden hose, and next thing you know, you got clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water, because you've completely flushed it out. So this is going to be through gradually bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path and practicing it consistently. You're going to be making wise decision after wise decision after wise decision. That's putting the clean water into the garden hose. Right? But right now, you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. So even though we're hooking up the garden hose to the faucet, you're still putting some mud in your garden hose to a certain degree, right? So you'd like to bring down your craving, anger, and ignorance and increase your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom as much as possible over the coming days and weeks and months and years. Right? So it's the Eightfold Path, learning and practicing that in your day-to-day life, which is going to produce the wholesome Kamma. Because whenever you're making decisions through the Eightfold Path, it's going to produce wholesome results for you. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. That's why you need to know that inside and out. You need to commit it to your memory so that you can practice it. And then as you're experiencing this old unwholesome Kamma coming back to you, instead of the way you used to make decisions, you now make decisions through the Eightfold Path. And this will extinguish your old unwholesome Kamma, because in the present moment, you're only making wise decisions, and now you're producing new wholesome Kamma. Okay, so I'll give you some examples from my life to help you be able to see how this works. Okay, so in the past, when I was growing up, I learned a lot of bitterness and hostility. That was what was going on in our house when I was growing up, and that's what I learned. I remember one time I was at McDonald's and my mom ordered some food, and the French fries weren't on the tray, and all she did was yelled and hollered and screamed at the cashier in order to get her fries. Right? She could have very easily done it differently, but that's what I learned growing up. So my mind kind of conformed to that to a certain degree as I was growing up. I functioned like that to a certain degree, right? Of course, I was polite and respectful sometimes, but other times I could be bitter and harsh and hostile. So my current wife, who we've now been together for 18 years, when we first met, I was nice for a period of time. We're always on the honeymoon phase. We're on our best behavior when we're around that person. But at a certain point, we start being a little bit bitter and harsh and hostile with that person because we get attached, we have cravings, and we're kind of bitter and harsh and hostile to this person. So I was doing that throughout our relationship to a certain degree. And then over time, our life was becoming more and more challenging. And at the 11th year mark, I decided I was going to change, that I was interested in improving the way I was doing things, and I no longer liked the way that I was doing things, being bitter and harsh and hostile. So I started transforming my mind and changing the way that I interacted in the world. And I started being loving and kind and warm and gentle with my wife. But I had put a bunch of mud in my garden hose. So there were times when I would come home from wherever I was, and she would just start yelling and hollering at me. Right? Or she would get upset and angry and just start yelling and hollering at me. Where in the past, what I would have done is I would have just yelled and holler right back at her. Right? She picked up the rubber ball of anger and throw it around the house. I'd pick up the rubber ball of anger and throw it around the house. The next thing you know, we've got all these rubber balls bouncing around. But knowing these teachings, and if I continue to put out bitterness and harshness and hostility, it was just going to keep coming back to me like it was in the past. I decided to do something different. I decided to change. I started to practice the Eightfold Path. So now when she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile with me, I chose to walk away, right? Where before I would stand there and I'd argue, right? It was a fight to death of who was right and who was wrong. But now I just started walking away and letting her see that it was her mind that was angry. It wasn't my mind. So I did that for a period of time. And the bouts of anger and the intensity of them started to go wider and wider and wider. It was less and less frequent because I wasn't putting out any more bitterness and hostility, so it wasn't coming back to me. She could see more and more that it was her mind that was having that anger and bitterness and hostility. But then sometimes she would be yelling and hollering and screaming, and I would just sit there and I would listen to her, everything she had to say, let her get it all out, and then I would say, "Thank you, dear," and I would why her, and I'd just kind of walk away. Right? And then she could see I was just being loving and kind. And then when I had even more control over my mind, as she would be yelling at me, I would be like, "Yeah, you're right. I was a bad husband. You're right. I did some horrible things. I'm really sorry about that." But what about now? What have I been doing now? Right? Because she saw many months of me being nice and friendly and warm and gentle. And over time, she started to extinguish her anger. Because she wasn't getting any anger from me, she could see she was the one dwelling in the anger, that her husband was no longer angry. So it took about 1.5 years. And over that time frame, she stopped yelling. She stopped being angry. She stopped being bitter and harsh and hostile. We didn't argue anymore. So it's been about 5 or 6 years since we've done any of that kind of stuff. There's only been harmony in our relationship, right? So while we've been together for 18 years, we've been happily together for about 6. Right? It takes some time to figure that out and train your mind to get rid of your attachment. But I had to extinguish this unwholesome karma. It had to come back to me because that's what I was putting out previously. So I had to experience that. But then there was some other unwholesome karma that I saw too. Because my son at the age of 6, he was 6 at the time, he was also being bitter and harsh with his mom because he had learned it from me. He saw me doing that, so he was doing that as well. And they were having a contentious relationship and a difficult relationship. So then I had to help my son learn in these teachings too, so he could clean up his relationship with his mom. And I had to help his mom to learn how to practice these teachings so she could clean up the relationship with her son. Right? So I needed to clean that up as well. And now we're at the point where there's never an argument, there's never frustration, there's never agitation in our home. Everything's harmonious. It's been like that for multiple years. Not just my wife, my son, and I, but even our extended family. We don't have people putting expectations on us, trying to control us, tell us what we should or shouldn't do. We don't have arguments with anybody. Our entire family is just completely peaceful because we don't have this hostility and bitterness. We don't have that attachment and the craving in our relationships. Everybody just lets each other be. And we just make our own decisions without anybody putting expectations on us, right? So this is what you can get to if you practice these teachings for yourself. You're not going out and teaching other people how to practice these teachings. You're just practicing them yourself. By me practicing the teachings myself, my wife could see that it was her mind that was angry. And then slowly but surely, she was also learning the teachings, so she was able to apply them and figure out how to extinguish her craving. Right? So this is what you're going to need to do in all your different relationships. You're going to need to extinguish your unwholesome karma. And the way that you're going to need to do this is start with training your own mind. Right? That's where you're practicing the Eightfold Path. You're going to need to bring that up more and more and more. Right? So you're going to need breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, generosity, all these different things that I've been teaching you. Slowly but surely, you dial this into your life and you'll be able to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. And in terms of your relationships, it's what I was sharing the other day. There's certain relationships that you have right now that maybe there's bitterness, harshness, and hostility in them, and you're not committed to the relationship, and you're not willing to do the work to actually resolve these challenges in this relationship. There's just too much bitterness and hostility, and there's not a commitment from you in the relationship. So it's better for you to just walk away from the relationship. And that's going to help you to extinguish that unwholesome karma. You don't have to go to that person and download all the reasons why you can't be their friend or something like that, because you're just listing out your expectations and your cravings. All you need to do is just gradually move away from that relationship. And that's going to clean up your unwholesome karma with those individuals, right? Now, there's a second category of relationships, people that you're probably more committed to, like your parents, your siblings, your children, life partners, people like this. Those individuals, maybe you're having challenges in the relationship, but you're committed to those relationships and you would really like to see it work out. So you're going to need to do some work on your mind, training your mind, and then you'll be better in that relationship. Like I was with my wife, like I was with my son, like I was with my mom. I had to do the work first in training my mind, and then I could do better in that relationship. Then there's a third category of relationships, brand new people that you haven't even met yet. You don't even know their names. But when you meet them, you're going to be practicing these teachings, and you're only ever going to be loving and kind and warm and gentle. You're going to be practicing the Eightfold Path throughout that entire relationship, and now you're going to have nothing but wholesome results in your relationships. Right? So these are the three categories of relationships. Some you're going to need to let go of. Some you're going to need to clean up your mind and do better in this relationship. Others are going to be brand new relationships, and you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships. And this is how you get to a point where all your relationships are harmonious. Other people might not be able to be harmonious with you, but you'll be able to be harmonious with them, right? People will still get angry or frustrated around you, but you won't be angry or frustrated, right? You won't be upset. You'll know that it's their mind that's causing that, not you, right? So you'll occasionally still have that going on, but you've got this mud in your garden hose that you're going to need to extinguish. So that's why you're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path and now practicing it for an extended period of time. And that's putting more and more water into your garden hose. So let me know what questions you guys have here on extinguishing your unwholesome karma. Yep.
So I can see that if we're in a situation, it's being able to step back and look at that situation and decide how we're going to react in that situation. That makes complete sense to me. But what about situations where something can happen to us and we don't know? So, for example, I remember when I was younger, there was a situation in life where I had a decision to make. And it was a very everyday decision to make. It wasn't something profound. It was either do this or do that. And I didn't know at the time that whatever decision I made, one would have had potentially very negative consequences. I had no idea at the time. It was just like an everyday decision to make, do this or do that. Fortunately, I made another decision. Everything was fine, so that's good. But had I made the other decision unknowingly, completely unknowingly, it could have led to very negative consequences. So is that karma?
Yes. That's why the more you know about this natural law, you'll be able to make decisions wisely, intentionally, right? And you like to get more and more intentional decisions that are wise. But if you're making decisions that through this lack of wisdom, that craving, anger, ignorance, it will produce unwholesome results. So you're going to need to learn this natural law more and more and more and more closely. And now you actively make decisions through this natural law rather than this lack of wisdom of the natural law. So this is why people go out into the world. There's ego in the mind, thinking I'm great, everybody else is horrible. And now when someone experiences unwholesome results, they blame it on other people. They're like, it's not me, I'm perfect. Everybody else is the problem here, right? Someone might call this a narcissist, right? So this is someone with a really high ego. I'm right, I'm good, I'm wholesome, I'm doing everything right. Anything bad happening in my life is coming from other people. This is not true reality. And that's why that type of individual will just keep having problem after problem after problem, because they're never cultivating wisdom to make better decisions and experience different results. So even though you have lacked the wisdom of this natural law of Kamma and you continue to lack it, right? Because you're still growing and building knowledge of it. You've made certain decisions in the past inadvertently that were unwise, and you didn't necessarily know at the time. You thought that based on what you had available to you in your mind at that time, you were making a decision you thought was best, but it wasn't necessarily the best decision. And that's where you experience unwholesome results. This is where you might have gone into a conversation at different times thinking you had all the best intentions in the world, and now you have this conversation and it blows up on you. And you're like, whoa, what just happened, right? Because you thought you had all the best intentions in the world. But if you didn't have right intention and right speech and right action, the way the Buddha teaches, then you weren't practicing the natural law of Kamma. So that's why that situation blew up and amounted to unwholesome results in those situations. But now the more you learn about this natural law, you intentionally and actively start making wiser and wiser decisions based on this natural law, so that way you'll experience more and more wholesome results.
But I'm still confused, because that particular situation, there was no way of knowing beforehand what could have happened. It was impossible. I didn't have nobody could, I don't see how anybody could have known what was going to happen. So fortunately, I did something, and I didn't receive that negative outcome. I couldn't have known beforehand. It was just, to me, it seemed like by chance. I said, okay, I made this decision. Thankfully, this bad thing didn't happen. Had I made this decision, a bad thing could have happened. And I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, right now you don't know, right? Because you don't know the natural law. If you'd like to share the details, I can help you.
Oh, okay, sure. So this was a lot younger when I was living in London, and I was at university. I went to my friend's house, and we were chatting. We had a few drinks, and then I had a lecture the next morning back at university, and she said to me, "Oh," and I was a bit drunk, and she said, "Oh, do you want to stay the night?" And I thought, maybe I could stay the night, but then if I'd need to get the train back in the following morning, and if I
batteries are out. You just put it on the floor so we can swap out the batteries.
So I was going through my mind, do I stay or do I go? Anyway, I made the decision to go back that evening, got the train back to my apartment, and went to my lecture the next day. However, had I stayed the night and gone back the following morning at the train station that I would have gone to I remember because it was platform 4, there was a bomb in the washroom, and I knew where I used to stand, so that was a situation where I could have been actually injured by that bomb the following day. But I had no way of knowing that beforehand, so that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, so the way that you think about the natural law of Kamma, it's a sequence of events, right? So when we say that you're not going to experience any unwholesome results, in that situation, let's just say you did go to that platform and you did experience the bomb blast, and now you are dead. Remember, I mentioned to you, no matter how enlightened you are, you can't avoid sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. You're still going to experience death. You can't avoid that, right? So those kinds of situations are still going to occur. But what you know not to do based on the natural law of Kamma, if you're wise, is you wouldn't go into a war zone, for example, and start killing other soldiers because you're likely to get killed in that situation. So getting to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome results, again, doesn't mean that everything's going your way and you're never going to die, for example. That's not what that means. So that situation of choosing to leave when you left when you left, and now this being is still alive, this sequence of events has led to you still being alive in this life. But at some point, you're going to meet with death. It's going to happen, no matter how enlightened you are. Even if you get to enlightenment, you're still going to experience death. So that person who's enlightened could still be standing in that bathroom, and there could still be a bomb that goes off. But when they die, their mind's completely peaceful and completely joyful. So it doesn't mean that nothing harmful is never going to happen to you, right? You can still experience that because you're still going to experience death. So you need to be able to see the intricacies of this natural law and not think that, life is just going to be wide open for you and you're never going to experience these kinds of things. Because you can still experience those kinds of things, but your mind is going to be processing it peacefully and joyfully. So for example, like me, the things that I do here, there's people that gossip and slander about me all the time, right? Like they're maybe envious or jealous, or maybe they have some misperception about what I'm doing or how I'm doing it. I can see it on Facebook. Sometimes people will gossip and slander, or sometimes students contact me. They're like, hey, I was just talking to such and such and they were gossiping about you. Oh, well, right? Your mind's going to still be peaceful when this is happening, because you don't crave permanence, wanting everybody to be a certain way. So these things are still going to happen. It's just that your mind's going to be completely peaceful and joyful. But 99.9% of the time, everything that's happening in your life is absolutely wonderful. But you're going to have occasional things like this, but your mind's going to be unaffected by it. It's not going to happen. Even during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was people who tried to kill him. Right? There was an individual, one time he was about to go down this street, and people said, hey, there's a murderer down there. Don't go down that street. There's a murderer down there. This person had murdered 999 people. And the Buddha was on his way to another town, and he just decided to walk down this street. And this murderer saw him coming, and he started chasing after the Buddha with a sword. And he was chasing after the Buddha, and the Buddha was just walking. And the person was like, stop, stop, stop. And the Buddha just kept walking because this guy wanted to murder the Buddha. He had murdered 999 people. And he was even wearing a necklace with all these fingers from the people that he had murdered, right? And the murderer kept chasing after the Buddha, saying, stop, stop, stop. And he was chasing him with this sword, and the Buddha just kept walking, right? And then eventually he said, stop, stop, stop. And the Buddha stopped, and he turned around and he says, I have stopped. It's you that hasn't stopped. I stopped killing. I stopped stealing. I stopped sexual misconduct. I stopped lying. I stopped taking intoxicants. It's you that hasn't stopped. And then this person was like shocked by what the Buddha said, and ultimately asked the Buddha if he could be his student in order to train his mind and transform his life. So you'll still have situations like that, but you'll just be completely calm when it's happening. There was a person who was jealous of the Buddha. It was actually a student of the Buddha, and actually a family member of the Buddha. The Buddha was in a certain area, and this person was trying to roll a big boulder off of a cliff to be able to kill the Buddha, because people were envious and jealous of what he had created and what he was developing. So you're going to still experience these things, but you'll be completely peaceful and joyful if any of these kinds of things are happening. And it's very rare, very infrequent that these kinds of things will happen, but your mind will be completely peaceful when it's happening. So it's not to say that none of those kinds of things will ever happen. It's just that your mind will process it in a very peaceful and joyful way. There's a question. Let me take this question online, and then I'll let you speak, Amen. So it's Julie is on Zoom. She says, divorce was not a thing back 2,500 years ago. I think I am wondering what Buddha thinks of divorce if he is alive. So it's actually untrue that divorce didn't exist 2,500 years ago, because remember, the universal truth of impermanence has existed ever since the beginning of time. So things are temporary, people are coming and going, things arise, change, and fade away. So relationships were not permanent 2,500 years ago. People would come together, have relationships, and choose to leave and break up. This is impermanence. It's a myth to think that divorce didn't exist during that time frame. If somebody chooses to divorce, this is understandable, because if we've made a decision 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago about a certain partner and a certain type of individual we would like to be with, that decision is not permanent, right? So if we hold on to that decision and thinking that it should be permanent, now you're going to really suffer, because you're maybe holding on to a relationship that otherwise you would like to move beyond and move past. So there's no harm in choosing to leave out of a relationship. And even if there's a divorce that needs to occur, that's fine. You can do those kinds of things. The Buddha would have taught the universal truth of impermanence, that people come and go in and out of relationships. And it would be unwise to cling or hold on to a relationship just because you decided 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 10 or 5 years ago or 2 years ago that you would like to have a relationship with this person. Now, in the present moment, if you're choosing that, hey, I'm not interested in having a relationship with this person anymore, you can move beyond that. It's only when you cling to the relationship and you hold on to it that it's going to be painful. So if somebody's choosing to move on from a relationship, they surely can, and it's only the holding on to it that would cause the pain. So the Buddha would understand this, because he understood the universal truth of impermanence. That's the very first beginning teaching. So it's important to understand that divorces did happen all throughout history. People have never been in permanent relationships.
The Buddha seems to say that every karma manifests in a physical way, as if I am a bank robber, I could somehow anticipate being penniless at some point, this life or another life. But did he ever mention anything about feeling conscious? Because I have a conscience. how that may manifest. You know what I mean?
No.
Okay, yeah.
And by the way, just because you've done something, it's not like an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Just because you've robbed and you've stolen doesn't mean you're going to be penniless, right? It's not a direct correlation like that. But if you do steal, there is going to be unwholesome results from that. But exactly what it is, it's going to be unique in each situation.
Yeah, I suppose the result of greed then, in that case, I would experience on it. But I suppose the more I investigate the way I think and the way I behave, it seems now, some 30 or 40 years later, I think back to when I've acted totally selfishly, which I did for a long, long time, I think, and I said very hurtful things to people. It only seems now, well, I've never forgotten what I did and said, but it's only now that I really feel the impact of that, and I'm left with a lot of kind of deep shame, regret, and I wonder if that could be karma.
Oh, yes.
As instead of maybe not so much some, like a lot of the examples you've given, if I'm I don't know, of some kind, someone's going to round up and give me a good hiding, and that's going to be it. But I can also, and these microphones, I tell you, the karma can,
they're impermanent, surely. Yeah, so to get to your question and your answer is, yes, the discontentedness you experience is part of your unwholesome karma. Because the mind has these pollutions, it has craving, anger, and ignorance, you are experiencing the unwholesome effects of that. And because the mind is having craving, anger, and ignorance, you're experiencing the guilt or the shame or the stress or the anxiety. So that's why when you extinguish your craving, anger, and ignorance, you will no longer experience that. So whether you get to enlightenment or not isn't determined based on the external things that are happening around you. You will see that as an enlightened being, your life will be going very harmonious, and there's very rarely any kind of thing that's happening. Like I mentioned, very rarely is there someone around me that is being bitter and harsh and hostile. It's just always harmonious conversations with everybody around me. But in that rare occasion when there is something that is occurring, the mind is completely peaceful, right? Because there's the craving, anger, and ignorance. You can extinguish that in your mind, and now whatever you're experiencing is peace and joy in your own mind, no matter what's happening externally. So any kind of discontentedness you experience, that is part of your unwholesome karma that you're experiencing. Your microphone was given away. See, it's really impermanent, right?
A question. It ties in with what Simon and Eamon have mentioned. So, and I'm going to summarize it maybe with there's two sides to the coin. So something terrible happens, and again, it's a result of some bad karma, of some action that you performed sometime in, let's say, in the past. It's coming and you're experiencing it, but can it also be used as a catalyst? And I'll use the example. So in when I was posted in Hong Kong, I was bringing my son to school, and this is during the Yellow Umbrella Revolution. This is when the protesters started to become a little bit, I don't want to say violent. I mean, violent is, it's no rounds not going down range, but rather they used incendiaries, put it in garbage cans, and threw them down the staircases of the MTR. So the only way we could escape was either go to the elevator, which has a capacity issue, or go onto the MTR and exit out the tracks. So you can see the dilemma there. And again, it was a morning. This is full-blown morning session, so the MTR is packed and people were panicking. Certainly, I must have done something, whether it's banking, I must have muppeted something, and it's coming back to me. And I had my son, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we realized here's an opportunity for us to go somewhere. So we looked at it as a positive too. I mean, yes, it took us, for my wife, it took definitely a longer time for her to look at that, but I looked at it also as a positive. Maybe this is the trigger that we needed to leave Hong Kong.
So this is extinguishing your unwholesome karma, right? Like say you're living in a certain place where there's a lot of craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're seeing these kinds of events, and it's the choice that you made to live in that place. It's not like you've done something in a past life where you threw a fiery trash can at somebody, so now someone's throwing one at you. It's not like that. It's that you've chosen to live in this particular place where perhaps there's a lot of craving, anger, and ignorance. Now you're seeing that, and you're seeing the results of that, and you're like, hey, I'm not interested in living in this kind of place. I'm going to clean this up by making an improved decision. And now let me go live in Thailand. Maybe that's what you've decided, right? I'm going to go live in Thailand. These people seem pretty peaceful. Now let me go live there. And now you've cleaned up that kamma. You've cleaned up that potentially unwise decision to live in that particular environment where there's a lot of craving, anger, and ignorance, right? And that's what a fair number of people are going to choose to do, is they're going to move from place to place to place, where like when the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, there was a mass exodus. A lot of people left. They were like, I'm not interested in being in a war zone. I'm not interested in contributing to a war. I'm out of here. Right. And that was them making a decision, in my opinion, a wise decision to get out. Right. And that's how we improve our kamma. That when we see unwholesome kamma occurring, you extinguish it by making improved decisions. And now through this wisdom, you will make improved decisions that lead to improved results. Mm-hmm. Yep. You're welcome. Arturo?
About what you said this morning about the 3 different kinds of relationships, yeah? How do you draw the line between the people that you have a commitment to and the people that it's probably best or wisest to walk away from? Because I have a bit of a, situation with my family where I sort of, over the years, I sort of tried multiple times, to mend situations, etc. And there were bouts of time where I sort of decided, okay, it's probably best to just like cut the relationship altogether. Mm-hmm. And I have to say those were probably the happiest times of my life, where I was actually able to rebuild a lot of the things that, I had to work through. So how do you, so that would be the first side of the question. And then the second side of the question would be, what about in a professional environment where maybe you're met with a lot of hostility, maybe it's a bit of a cutthroat type of environment, and you can't really walk away from colleagues. You have a lot of pressures coming from all sorts of different sides. How do you still show up, like being wise and kind and loving when the environment is sort of, pushing you like consistently in the opposite direction? Mm-hmm. And it's almost a question of professional survival, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. So whether you choose to walk away from a relationship or you step away from it and train your own mind and then improve from there, that's something that you're going to need to look at for each individual relationship and decide for yourself. And nobody can tell you what would be wise or unwise, because you're going to need to decide on your own what relationships you need to let go of and what relationships you're more interested in seeing improve. So that's going to be a case-by-case basis for you to be able to make. And it's going to come down to your level of commitment and involvement in this person's life. Oftentimes, family members, people are more committed to those relationships, but not always, right? Sometimes you just walk away from someone. Like my uncle, growing up, he never had anything positive to say to any of us in the family. He was always addicted to drugs and alcohol. He lived with his mom all the way until he died at the age of 61. He was a very bitter and harsh and hostile person. I stopped talking to him when I was like 17, 18 years old, never talked to him again a day in my life, right? And that's some of the people you're going to have in your life that's what you're going to need to do in order to clean that up, because this person has just never shown you anything that there's any chance of a relationship there whatsoever. But then there's other relationships, like with my mom and my sister. I stepped away from those for periods of time, sometimes even years. And then I did work, they were doing work, and now we've come back together, and now we have a wonderful relationship. My mom's passed away now, but me and my sister, since my mom's passing, have come back together, and our relationship's completely fine, right? So there's going to be different people like that, and you might might not know today which category somebody falls into. And you might decide, like my sister, when I stepped away from that relationship, I didn't know if I would ever have a relationship with her again, ever. But yeah, it turned out that we did. We did decide to have a relationship again. So you're going to need to make that on a case-by-case basis. In a situation where you're in a professional environment and people are bitter and harsh and hostile and cutthroat and competition to get to the top, that's where you're going to have to decide, am I interested in being part of this kind of environment or not? Most likely, you're probably going to get to a point where you're like, I'm going to go find another company, another organization. Maybe you start your own so you have more ability to kind of shape the environment that you're in. I've seen a lot of people who are on this path that are self-employed, have their own businesses or do their own things, entrepreneur type spirit. Obviously, some people are going to be employees of others, especially as more and more people in the world become more awake. But as you're becoming more and more awake, working for someone who has craving, anger, and ignorance, it's like, oh my goodness, like they're trying to get me to implement these decisions, and you just know how unwise the decision is. Oftentimes people go off on their own and they start their own thing. So if you're in an environment where there's a lot of cutthroat competition to get to the top, you've got to decide whether you'd like to continue to stay in that. But just because other people are doing that doesn't mean that you have to do it. Because typically what people are doing is they're kind of clamoring for more money, or they're clamoring for a bigger title, or they're clamoring to look a certain way in front of other members of the company. And you don't have to subscribe to that. You can just do your work, do it well, get the money that you need in order to sustain your life, and just apply yourself and not have to fight everybody else to be at the top. You know, this is like a pack of animals that are essentially functioning that way. So you could either find another company, or if you're pleased with the work that you're doing, you're just not interested in that kind of stuff, just choose not to get involved in that and know wisely that that's what you're doing, and that you might not progress in this particular company the way everybody else is doing, but that's okay for you. So you have to decide, which category is it? Would you rather just completely get away from that environment, or can you be content in that environment but just choosing to do your own thing and focus on your own work? And that's, again, a decision that you need to make. And whatever decision you make, you're going to need to find contentedness there and peacefulness and joy there. And that's where you've got to look at it, look at all the variables, and decide for yourself, which one is it. Mm-hmm. Julie? We have a Julie here as well.
I really love that analogy you spoke about, the mud in the hose. And so I'm thinking about that and my relationship with my siblings, and I really don't want to address that right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's something maybe sometime in the future I'll look at addressing, but I'm not going to do that. Does that mean that I've got a big piece of mud in my hose that's going to sit there and continue to cause me unwholesome karma until I can address it?
So addressing it, like say you would like to improve a relationship with your siblings, the first thing you need to do is eliminate your attachment and your craving for them to be a certain way, right? Because that's typically what we do in these relationships. So stepping away from the relationship and distancing yourself from it allows your mind to let go. And now, as you're training your mind, and it's wise to not address some of these deeper ones up front, but as you're training your mind, you're experiencing more wisdom, you kind of understand. Now you can decide whether or not you're going to have a relationship with this person or not. If you're going to have a relationship with this person, now you're going back and trying to have this relationship. But another way to clean this up is just choose to not have a relationship with that person any longer. That's a way to clean it up too. And that's where you've got to look at it and say, if I get to the end of this life and I've never had a healthy relationship with my brother or my sister, whomever, would I feel content? Would I feel joyful with that? And if the answer is yes, then okay, you don't need to have a relationship with them. If the answer is no, I don't want to leave this life until I have a healthy relationship with my brothers and sisters, then the mind's going to maybe need to do that. Right? Because there's two ways to eliminate a craving, desire, attachment. There's cutting it off and letting it go, which is primarily what we tend to focus on, but there's also fulfilling it. and actually doing it. So like if I had a craving, a longing, yearning to go to the Philippines, and I've never been to the Philippines before, I could choose to cut that off and let it go and turn my mind, no, you don't need to go to the Philippines. You don't have the money. You need to stay right here in Thailand. Or if I have this longing, yearning to go to the Philippines, I could just go and check it out and look around. And then I could cross it off my list and be like, all right, been there, done that. And you just watch over the mind, make sure it doesn't become, oh, then I need to go to Japan, and then I need to go to China, and then I need to go here, and then I need to go there. That's the craving that the mind always wants more. So there's certain cravings, desires, attachments that you'll extinguish, cut off, and eliminate. And there's others that you're going to just need to fulfill and actually do it. And you're going to need to decide for yourself with your brothers and sisters, which one is this? Because there's some underlying craving, or else you wouldn't be discontent in the relationship. Is this a type of craving that you're going to distance yourself from this person and never go back and have another relationship with them? Or is it something that you're going to need to fulfill at some time, which means that you're going to need to train your mind, work on your mind, and then get back involved in the relationship? But in that situation, you're not fixing them. You're not trying to fix them to be a certain way, but you've worked on your mind so that now when they're doing things that you disagree with, your mind's unaffected by it, right? So when me and my mom and me and my wife and these kinds of things, improving our relationship, it's just that I don't have any expectations for them anymore, right? My wife still does things that I disagree with, but I'm just not affected by it because I don't have expectations of her, right? There's times where I've woken up in the morning and there's like drills and saws in the house going on at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m. in the morning. And I wake up out of a sleep and there's like 3 or 4 construction workers in our house remodeling a certain room. And I go to my wife, I'm like, what's happening? She's like, oh, I'm going to install this yoga sling. I'm hanging it off the rafters and I'm going to be doing flying yoga over here. And I was like, oh, like you didn't think we should talk about that? No, you're not involved. You're not going to be doing it. I'm the only one doing it. So I'm just going to do it. I didn't need to ask you. And I was like, okay, I'm going back to sleep. Where before I would have been so angry. Like, what do you mean you're changing the house without talking to me? Like, this is my house. You know, I would have been so angry and upset. So she still does things that I disagree with, but I just not affected by it at this point. So when you go back to be with your brothers and sisters, they're still going to do things that you disagree with. But if you've eliminated your expectations and your cravings, you'll be peaceful and joyful because you understand that that's just impermanence. You don't make decisions that way. Like when I would like to change something in the house, I talk it out with my wife and I make sure that she's well aware of it. But she chooses to do it completely different. And that's okay. That's her choice. My way's not the right way or the wrong way. Her way's not the right way or the wrong way. It's just a different way of approaching it. So you're going to need to get to that level of comfort in each one of your relationships where you understand they're making decisions differently and that's okay. And you're not trying to change them or force them to do things your way.
I moved back to my hometown when my mother became unwell and subsequently passed away. And now I care for my 90-year-old father. My siblings all moved to a different state, 2,000 kilometers away. Mm-hmm. And just that, it's that challenge of not only do I feel like the responsibility is left on me, but also, the lack of care.
Okay, so that's you wanting them to function the same way as you, where they're making their decisions, what's best for their life, and you don't have full insight into their life and what they're choosing to do, and what their relationship was with your father. You don't know that, right? So all you can do is make the decisions you're making, which is you're choosing to take care of your father, and you need to be comfortable with that and not want them to be a certain way. And now you need to practice this generosity towards your father out of without any expectation of anything in return. And this is you practicing love and kindness, generosity and wisdom with your dad, because obviously he took care of you to a certain degree. So now that Kamma is coming back to him, right? So the relationship that he had with these other children that he didn't have that same type of relationship with them. So they're making different choices. And that's all that is. It's not that you're right and they're wrong, or they're right and you're wrong. It's just different choices. And you're going to have to get to the point where you're comfortable if you're going to ever get to peace and joy and just realize, hey, that's their decision. That's their choice. I'm making my choice. And these are independent things. Yep. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so one more thing. Oh, you're welcome, Julie. Teacher David, are you also going to talk about karma from past lives? I usually wait until somebody brings that up, but I think you actually asked the question, Eamon, on Monday. So yeah, we can talk about that, Julie. So sometimes people ask, like, how do you experience karma from your past lives? How does that happen? What's the mechanism involved? Okay, so first, the way that the cycle of rebirth works is, say you have cardboard box A. This is your mind, right? And there's certain contents in cardboard box A. Cardboard box A is a certain size, certain shape, certain texture, certain color, right? And this is a previous life. And if there's contents in that cardboard box, and that at the end of this life, this cardboard box is going to dissolve. This mind is going to dissolve because it's impermanent. So there's certain cravings and residual memories from your previous mind that needed to find a new mind. And now there's this new mind. David's or Eamon or Simon or whoever. Now there's this new mind. It's a new cardboard box, completely different shape, color, texture, all that kind of stuff. But the contents from the previous cardboard box are now in this new cardboard box. And now in this current life, this individual is going to be making decisions based on those cravings from a previous life and producing and experiencing results in this life based on cravings from a previous life. So let me give you an example. Say there's Bob in a previous life who was very sexually promiscuous, and he was having sex with lots and lots and lots of different people. And he did that all throughout his life. He had all kinds of turmoil and difficulties in his life, but he kept doing this over and over and over and over again. Well, now when Bob dies, that mind is not enlightened yet. There's still cravings and residual memories there. And now it spawns a new mind. And now there's this new mind, and let's just call her Barbara. Okay, so now Barbara has these cravings from Bob, right? Barbara doesn't even necessarily know this, right? So there's these cravings and residual memories in the mind of Barbara. Now Barbara is also being very sexually promiscuous, having lots of broken relationships, maybe having sex with lots of different people. Maybe by the age of 40, 45 years old, maybe she contracts HIV, and maybe she ends up passing away or dying, right, at a young age. This is the unwholesome karma that Barbara is experiencing. We can say that's from a previous life because Bob never extinguished his craving for sexual contact. But now when that craving and residual memories came into this mind of Barbara, Barbara also acted upon those same cravings. And now that's old unwholesome karma. But it's from this life that Barbara is acting upon those same cravings that are leading to these unwholesome results. Because Barbara could have also found this path to enlightenment at any age during her life, maybe in her early 20s, learned about how unwise it is to be so sexually promiscuous, and now she could have improved her moral conduct, made better decisions, and she wouldn't have contracted HIV, and now she could have lived a nice long life, having a loyal, committed family and whatever else that she would like to have had potentially, right? But because Barbara didn't extinguish those cravings, now she experienced these unwholesome results of maybe dying early in life, right? And now that mind of Barbara, that's going to dissolve, and know those cravings and residual memories are going to go into the next life, and the next life, and the next life. So this is how you experience karma from one life to the next. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's just that cravings and residual memories are in this mind, and you're not going to necessarily know which cravings are from your previous lives and which ones are from this life, but you just focus on extinguishing all your cravings, all your longing, your yearning, your desire, your attachment. And by extinguishing those, you will extinguish your anger. And the way that you're accomplishing that is by extinguishing your ignorance, by cultivating wisdom. So by extinguishing your pollutions of mind, arising wisdom, you will then extinguish your craving and anger. And this is how you get more and more wholesome karma, by practicing the Eightfold Path. Does that make sense for you guys? You understand? Yep. Go for it.
So if Bob had corrected himself
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just used Barbara. Yeah.
would have less of the impact of previous life and maybe some traction to go become more enlightened.
Yeah, so I'll just repeat that for the people online. The question was if Bob would have worked on his mind a bit and diminished some of his craving, then Barbara would have had less craving to deal with in her life, and then there could have been different results for Barbara. The answer is yes. And that's kind of like the life that you're in now. It's like kind of like you're not interested in leaving trash around for somebody else, right? You'd like to kind of clean this up. And if you can get to enlightenment in this life, you've cleaned up everything. There's not going to be another life after this, right? But if you fell short of enlightenment for any reason, the work that you're doing now, cleaning up your mind, is going to make it better for the next being, whatever being that is. It's going to have less craving, desire, attachment, less pollution in that person's mind. So that's why you would like to stay dedicated and diligent to cleaning up this mind so that you don't leave a bunch of trash around for the next person or the next being. But potentially, if you're diligent enough, you'll get to enlightenment in this life and there won't be any trash for anybody to experience because you've completely purified your mind.
If you have, let's say, your child, that's not that's another life separate. But I'm trying to frame this that, in another life, if I have done something bad and trying to correct that, my offspring is a different life. Is that correct? So
yes.
Okay. So, but I'm just inspiration rather not the manifest or the carryover.
Yeah, you're not creating karma for your child. Okay. It's your child's decisions that are leading to their karma. But as you're cleaning up your mind and becoming wiser and wiser, your child is going to be learning that from you, right? This is where people think that alcoholism runs in families and they think it's genetic. It's actually not. What it is a little kid grows up seeing mom and dad or brothers and sisters, whoever. They see them, when they have problems, they turn to alcohol. Right? So now the children are like, oh, when I have a problem, I'm just going to turn to alcohol because that's what mom and dad does. Right? So the wisdom of how to solve your problems and challenges doesn't exist in that family. They haven't learned the wisdom of these teachings. Whereas if they learned the wisdom of these teachings, it would be, shared amongst the family members and people would understand how to problem solve. But if the way that this particular family handles things is when they're having difficulties, they turn to drugs and alcohol, then that's what the little kids learn growing up. And they will tend to turn to that too. The mind's kind of conforming to what's going on around them, and it's a lack of wisdom in this particular family that's leading to that. It's not genetic. You're not genetically disposed to having a craving for alcohol. It's from the lack of wisdom, thinking that this alcohol is somehow going to now produce some beneficial result for me. So it happens with the unwholesome things, but it also happens with the wholesome things too, right? If you're making wise choices and you have wisdom of these teachings, your children grow up seeing you and your partner talk, have conversations, discuss things, solve your issues. You're not yelling and hollering and bickering with each other. They're going to learn problem solving because that's what they see mom and dad doing. So now you cleaning up your mind does help your child. So this is one of the things my son and I talk about. I'm like, I don't know what you did in your past life, but it must have been really, really good to end up in a family where your mom is practicing the teachings, your dad is practicing the teachings. You're at the point where you're only experiencing annoyment once every 3 months right now. I asked him a few weeks ago, like, how frequently do you get discontent? He said about once every 3 months he gets annoyed because I've trained him since he was, pretty much when he was in the womb, his mom was meditating during that period of time. So I was like, man, I don't know what you did in your previous lives, but it must have been pretty good to get to this point where you're in this type of family, because he's going to have a completely different life than I had growing up, right? Like I had a really challenging life. So your children will learn either the wise way to do things or the unwise way to do things from you. But it's still their karma because they're choosing to learn that. Because you can grow up in a really wholesome family that are doing wholesome things, and you could choose to do unwholesome things. That's a choice that you could make. Or you could grow up in a really unwholesome family and choose to do wholesome things. So it's ultimately your decisions that are leading to any particular result. But by you giving a really helpful and beneficial example for your children, they have a more they have a better opportunity to experience wholesome results because they're learning that wisdom from you just through observing you and the way you interact in the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know who has questions. I saw. Yeah, go for it. You're welcome, Julie.
Oh, so I know one thing I'm struggling with, and I'm sure this is a common question. You've told to try to, when you say something, to try to independently verify certain things. So how can we verify? How can we understand that we had a past life and we will have a future life, or we'll be reborn? I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Yeah, so if you look in volume 11, chapter 105, there's 17 different criteria that I shared in there about how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. So it's in volume 11, chapter 105 for a reason, because it's not usually something you need to look at up front, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to. Some of those books were printed out before I put in the 17 criteria. So if you don't see it in there, definitely you can download it, and it's on the latest version online. But some of them will have it, some of them won't. Depends on when they were actually printed out. Because I just added it about a year ago, because this was a question that people had a lot. Yeah, volume 11, chapter 105. You'll see it in there. Mm-hmm. And there's some foundational teachings that you need, or some other teachings that you need, but there's plenty of things in there. I'll just give you a couple examples right now. Have you ever experienced deja vu? Yeah, that's your residual memories coming to the surface of your mind, right? It's like, whoa, this feels so familiar. I know I've done this before, but you know it wasn't in this life, right? Because you've never done that. You've never even been to that place before, but it's like, whoa, this feels so utterly familiar. That's your residual memories from previous lives coming up in your mind. Have you ever known of like an individual who's like 6 years old, they've never seen a piano a day in their life, they can walk over to a piano and play masterful piano? I don't know if you've ever heard anything like this. They oftentimes will call this person a prodigy. You know, what's really occurred is this person was most likely a pianist in their previous life, and now they can play perfectly masterful classical piano with like a little bit of touch-up work here and there, just to kind of bring their residual memories up to the front of their mind. And now at the age of 6, they're a masterful piano, or 7 or 8 or 9. This is because of their residual memory. So those are just a couple of examples, but you can look in there and you can see other things, because some of them are like other teachings that the Buddha taught, like dependent origination, which is back in volume 5. So that's why it's in volume 11, because you kind of need to learn all these other things, but you can go look at it now. There's no harm in doing that, but you're not going to be able to know each of those 17 yet, because you haven't really explored all the different teachings. There's a particular teaching called dependent origination, which is like the highest, most ultimate truth that the Buddha teaches, where he shows you 12 interlinking steps of exactly why you keep coming back into the world over and over and over again, and why you keep experiencing discontentedness. The Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into it, but dependent origination gives you the depth of exactly why this is occurring with 12 interlinking steps. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's one other thing to talk about here in relationship to Kamma before we take our break. So sometimes when I teach this, people are like, hold on a second, David, you said that you can't run and hide from your Kamma, but what about that guy who, like, there was a bloody footprint at the murder scene, you know, there was blood all over his car, the murder weapon was under his bed. Didn't he run and hide from his Kamma? Because he went to court and he was found not guilty. Didn't he run and hide from his Kamma? And the answer is no. He hasn't run and hid from his Kamma. It's important to remember that the laws of society are imperfect because they're created by human beings. So going to a court of law and being found not guilty, even when there's all this evidence to show that you potentially did this crime, doesn't mean that you've run and hid from your Kamma, because going to jail and going to prison is just one aspect of your Kamma. There's other parts of your Kamma that you may or may not be seeing with this individual. So in this example where somebody has murdered and the bloody footprint is there, the murder weapons under their bed and all this stuff, and they go to court and they're found not guilty, they're still experiencing the results of their decisions. So you need to look at these other things. They're experiencing a bad reputation in their community because this is all over the news and plenty of people know about this situation. They're potentially going to experience sickness, disease, physical pain, and mental pain in a shortened lifespan. The way that this happens is that if you've killed and you have enough craving in your mind and enough anger and ignorance to kill another human being, you've got other cravings in your mind too that is producing all kinds of stress and guilt and shame and fear and other things like this, like anxiety in your mind. And that's putting pressure and causing difficulties in the physical body with your heart and your lungs and your kidneys and all this other stuff. Because if your mind is unwell, your body is going to be unwell as well. So you will experience these kinds of sickness, disease, physical and mental pain in a shortened lifespan because of this. You can also experience hostility, aggression, fights, and being killed yourself. Because if you had enough craving, anger, and ignorance to kill another human being, it's not like all the rest of your relationships are beautiful and wonderful and going outstanding, right? You're going to have difficulties in those relationships too. And you're experiencing these difficulties and struggles in those relationships as well. You're also going to experience a loss of income and wealth because going to defend yourself on a murder charge in a court of law is very expensive. You're going to have a depletion of wealth in order to go off and defend yourself on this. You're going to be having difficulties in other relationships, both personally and professionally. You're going to have challenges because your mind's having a deep amount of craving, anger, and ignorance. You notice that there'll be a problem with securing and progressing in employment, right? People aren't going to be interested in hiring you for a job. It's been all over the news that this person's a murderer, right? And even though you were found not guilty in the court of law, the court of public opinion is that you're a murderer and people aren't going to be interested in hiring you to work for them. You're going to have challenges securing housing, right? Would you like to be roommates with someone who's been up on a murder charge and their bloody footprint was at the murder scene and the murder weapon was under their bed? Probably not, right? There's going to be very few people who are interested in living with that individual. So securing housing is going to be challenging. And then because of the loss of wealth, it's going to be challenging to acquire basic necessities to sustain life. This is all the results of your decisions. This is all Kamma that an individual is experiencing. And then the discontentedness itself, the guilt and the shame and the fear and the stress and the anxiety in the mind, that's part of your Kamma too. And then rebirth, potentially being reborn into another existence, whether it's hell, animal, afflicted spirits, human realm, or otherwise, right? This is all Kamma. So the court of law is not perfect, right? It's human laws. So it's important to see that the laws of society are oftentimes part of your Kamma, but it's not 100% of your Kamma. There's other things that you're experiencing as well. So if you see on the news that somebody you thought should be guilty is found not guilty, you don't have to get upset with that. You don't have to get frustrated because they're experiencing their Kamma, right? And if you see someone that you think should be found not guilty and they're found guilty, that person's experiencing their Kamma too. I'll give you an example of that. Say that I was growing up and I was in a gang my whole life, right? Up until the age of 25. Maybe I was selling drugs. Maybe I was murdering people. Never got caught for any of this stuff. But at the age of 25, I decided to get out of the gang and I'm no longer going to do this kind of stuff. But now I'm 26, 27 years old and now the gang has gone off and done some murder. And now somehow I got pinned on me, even though I'm not even part of the gang anymore. And now, because I'm known to be with this gang, now the police come and arrest me. And now I go to court and I'm found guilty of this murder. And now I go to jail for something that I didn't even do. Well, this is my Kamma from all those other murders that I did and all that drugs dealing that I did that I never got caught for. Now I'm getting caught for this and this is getting pinned on me. And now I'm getting the consequences of this, right? So you can have situations where people are actually not guilty and they're found guilty and they end up going to court and going to prison potentially. And this is the results of their decisions from maybe previous things. This is their old Kamma coming back to them. So you can be sure that the natural law of Kamma is the most unbiased teacher you will ever find. Everyone is always experiencing their Kamma. In situations where you think for yourself, you think somebody's so good and so great, but they're yet experiencing these unwholesome results, you're not with them every second of the day to see every single decision that they're making. Maybe your perspective and the way you interact with them, you see them doing lots of wholesome things, but you're not with them all the time to see the other things that they're doing that are potentially unwholesome. So you're not going to be able to see somebody else's karma 100% because you're not with them all the time. You don't see every decision that they're making. But the more wisdom that you get on this natural law, you'll be able to see your karma more and more clearly, to the point where you can extinguish all your unwholesome karma. So there's no judgment here of looking at someone else's life and trying to determine what they should or shouldn't be receiving, because you're not with them 100% of the time and you don't know all the decisions that they're making. But you can know all your decisions and you can extinguish all your unwholesome karma. And that's the ultimate goal. Okay, so laws of society are not perfect because they're created and administered and enforced by human beings. And human beings have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind. So they're going to make unwise decisions sometimes. So they're going to not always be perfect. We should always aspire to have more and more equity and fairness in our court systems and things like this. But you should always know that they're prone to error because human beings are involved. Okay, so you have a question? Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
As you said, obviously the laws of society, they're a little subjective, but we have to live in a society, I suppose, where things are labeled good and bad and there are laws, etc. So when it comes to karma, is it a mistake to label karma good or bad? So if something happens to somebody and say, the person had good karma, bad karma, or is it just better to see it as karma? Because if we say it's good or bad, we're putting our own onto it.
Some people use the word good and bad. I use wholesome and unwholesome because I think it's better to use it that way. It does help you. You shouldn't judge other people, but it can help you to be able to see the decisions that people are making that are leading to a particular result, because you can learn from that, but you're just not interested in judging that person. So like now when I watch news on TV or online, I watch it very differently than I used to, because essentially what the news is reporting is the day's daily karma. Like they're talking about cause and effect, that things are happening in the world, right? And you can see the underlying, if you understand the natural law of Kamma, you can see the underlying decisions that are leading to any particular result that someone's experiencing, right? For example, I'm not saying this is good or bad or necessarily anything, but let's just say like there's a news report of somebody where they had police contact, and now when this police comes to talk to them, they get boisterous, they get angry, they get frustrated, they start using bitter and harsh and hostile language to the police, and now let's just say the police grab them and throw them on the ground and it dislocates their shoulder, and now for the rest of their life they have problems with their shoulder, right? I'm not saying whether this is wise or unwise, but that person is experiencing their karma, right? Because they were using wrong intention and wrong speech. They were being bitter and harsh and hostile. They were aggressive and this kind of thing. And the police officer took them and threw them and slammed them on the ground, right? So in this situation, you can see the natural law of Kamma at play. Whereas if you stand there, I've had police contact plenty of times. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to be friendly. I'm going to be respectful. And a police officer has never thrown me down on the ground ever in my life. But that's because I've never been bitter and harsh and hostile to them before. So you can watch the news, and when these things are being reported, if you know the natural law of Kamma, you can see it very clearly. So you're not going to always know other people's Kamma, but you can kind of look at other things that are happening in people's lives. And if you know the natural law of Kamma, you can see it, but you're just not interested in being judgmental about it. But there's no harm in calling it wholesome and unwholesome, because then you can see the wise decisions that are leading to wholesome Kamma and the unwise decisions that are leading to unwholesome Kamma. And that'll help you become more informed and more wise on this natural law, so that then you can make wiser and wiser decisions. So you're no longer kicking the sand up and it's blowing back in your face. Mm-hmm. Joe, you have a question?
Is our karma our consciousness?
the fact that we are all in this life is our karma, and the fact that we have a consciousness, that's our karma, right? Because if we would have got to enlightenment in a previous life, we wouldn't be experiencing this life. So that is our karma. And being in this human realm is the most ideal realm to be in, because we actually have the ability to cultivate our mind, and we experience all three feelings of pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant, which tends to be built-in motivation for us to get to enlightenment, because we don't like those painful feelings and those neither painful nor pleasant. We don't like those, so we're trying to get away from them. Where like in the animal realm, they experience those same three feelings as well, but they don't have the ability to cultivate their consciousness to the level of getting to enlightenment. It's only in the human and heavenly realm. But even in the heavenly realm, they experience exclusively pleasant feelings, so they tend to be complacent, and they don't apply effort to getting to enlightenment typically. So they're reborn into other realms. So this human existence, you would have had to have done a significant amount of wholesome karma in your previous lives to get to this point. And now that you're here, you have the most ideal opportunity. And that's why the Buddha teaches you, don't be complacent. Don't allow this life to go to waste, essentially. He encourages you to apply effort and energy towards learning and practicing these teachings, because this is like a very rare opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment from this human existence. He talks about if the entire world was flooded and there was a ring that was floating on the surface of the earth, he said, if there's a blind turtle at the bottom of the sea and it only comes up for air once every 100 years, if the entire earth is flooded and there's this ring that's floating around all over the earth being blown around by the wind, he says, how rare is it, how likely is it that this blind turtle is going to come to the surface of the earth once every 100 years and put its head inside this ring? He said, that's how rare it is to be able to get to this human life. So he's like, now that you've got this human life, don't allow it to go to waste. Yeah. You're welcome. So yeah, our consciousness, it is our karma, but we can extinguish it. And now we get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful, completely joyful. And that's the beauty about all this, because you'll see that it's happening, right? You'll see your mind becoming more and more peaceful and more joyful. So that's what, none of this stuff is based in belief. And someday you might even observe your past lives and you'll know that these things are true. Okay, so I'm going to take a break here for you guys. It's 5 minutes after 11. Let's take a 20-minute break. That'll bring us back at 11:25. And I'm going to discuss what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. So if you guys would like to take a 20-minute break, and then we'll pick it up at 11:25. Okay, so thank you for your questions and your discussion.